I'm Gemma Leggett with Remax Hallmark, and today I am here with Mitchell Korman from Korman and Company, and we are going to talk about COVID-19 and what impacts does it have on the real estate law. Thank you for joining, Mitchell.
Thanks for having me, Gemma.
My pleasure. So tell me, some people have purchased a home or bought a home prior to COVID, and how does this change now with closing dates and everything that's been happening? Because we've been in it for a month now.
Okay, well, for starters, before we got into this, I would call it this mess, which is essentially March 13th was the changing date for everybody.
Right.
If they had an agreement of purchase and sale signed prior to March 13th and it didn't mention COVID, that's fine. Those deals have been closing, and we are closing a lot of them. We closed 250 deals this month.
Wow.
That were signed prior to COVID being a problem or being out as a problem.
Okay.
And since then, a lot of people have been putting in clauses because they're concerned what happens if I get sick or what happens if I don't get sick, and we've drafted clauses and we've used them for people that have some fear. But by and large, everything is closing as it's always been closing. And we haven't actually had a single deal not close due to COVID-19, which has been remarkable. But things are, they are taking a little bit more time, but everything in the marketplace is closing.
Absolutely. That's my next question. Is there any delays?
Yeah, the delays are as a result of things that are unrelated to COVID-19. The real delays are because we're all working from home. So everybody is working from home on their computers, on their laptops, and not just us as lawyers, and our clerks and everybody else, but the banking people. You know, the people that are in your banks aren't in the banks anymore. They're not in the office towers. They're working from home, approving deals, underwriting, getting mortgage instructions out to us. So everything is new and everything takes a little bit longer to process.
That's so funny you say this, because I had a closing 2 weeks ago and it didn't close on time exactly for this reason. The mortgage agent was no longer working after a certain time, and so therefore the lawyer couldn't do anything. We had to close the next day.
Yep, absolutely. Things have improved tremendously. So,
okay.
You know, in the last 3 weeks, I would say we had one deal that didn't close, you know, exactly on time, and it was really because of a wiring problem. In the olden days are like 5 weeks ago, we used to courier checks to people, or we would sometimes wire or direct deposit. There were lots of different ways we'd get money from one law firm to another. Now everything is virtual, everything's done by wires. And as you know, sometimes wires take longer to get to one place or another than they used to. So for example, if a lawyer banks at TD and is wiring me funds to our account, which is at TD, that wire happens almost instantaneous. But if they're wiring funds from, let's say, Tangerine Bank or who knows who, or even Bank of Nova Scotia to TD, sometimes those wires take time and get held up in wire departments, and we don't see the money when we need to see the money, and deals get delayed. So that's been a something that's happened often, but we work through it. I mean, there's many ways of working through delays and closings.
Here, are we opening ourselves for problems?
There has always been fraud in the marketplace.
Fraud, exactly.
But fraud occurs on a fraction of 1%.
Okay.
Like a minuscule fraction of 1% of the time. And yeah, fraudsters are going to look for ways in our new environment of figuring out a way to defraud, you know, lawyers, realtors, clients, everybody. Right. And we have our guard up. You know, we're verifying where those funds come from, right, and how those funds get to us and who our clients are. And if we're suspicious or we have doubts, we're doing background checks on people to alleviate the risk for everybody. Because the last thing we want for the entire marketplace is for there to be increased levels of risk.
Absolutely.
And our title insurers have also stepped up, because the title insurance companies are providing extra coverage for fraud for the banks, for the lenders, because they also view that if the banks are scared or lenders don't want to lend, that hurts our market as well. So the insurance companies are adding additional layers of insurance to insure against fraud. They've always done this, but now they're doing it even more so.
That's impressive.
Because we have to keep the market running for everybody and our economy running for everybody. So we have to take the steps to find solutions to make everybody, banks, lenders, buyers, sellers, comfortable in the marketplace that we're in and the situation that we're in.
Absolutely. Now, has there any people who used COVID to back out of the deal?
We have not had a single deal happen like that yet.
Wow.
I'm sure that it will happen. And people ask me, what happens if buyer gets sick or seller gets sick? And by and large, we're reasonable people and we want deals to close. We don't want people to use COVID as an excuse to try to get out of a deal because they think the market has changed or something like that. We've had requests of people to try and do that, or we've had requests for price adjustments because they say the market's not what it used to be. And we just say no to those types of requests. But if someone were to call me up, another lawyer, and say, listen, my seller client is now in the hospital or can't move because of COVID, we'll figure out a way. We will extend a deal. We'll figure out, there's lots of tools in our toolbox to create a scenario that everybody feels safe and the real estate transaction will still get done. It might just get done a little bit later. And if that means that the seller is going to have to pay for some of the buyer's expenses because the buyer can't move in on time, so be it. We will negotiate that and we'll get it done.
Absolutely. What about if they lost their job? Do you see any problem here?
Well, to this point, even people losing their job, everybody says, I lost my job, even though most people are getting laid off or temporarily suspended or whatever. But if they say they lost their job, that's not a good thing. So people who say they lost their job, it's not always that they actually did lose their job completely. They will probably be going back to work as everybody else will in sometime in the near future.
Yeah, so that's not an excuse.
No, it's certainly not an excuse because deals still have to close. It just means the person that lost their job, the question is, can they still get financing? And by and large, the banks have still provided mortgages to people who were approved prior to them losing their job. And if that's a new occurrence, in some circumstances, the banks have said yes, and some they have said no. When a bank, let's say a Schedule A bank like TD, BMO, Nova Scotia says, no, we're not going to lend you money, there are many other avenues to get a mortgage. There are B lenders, there are C lenders, there are private lenders. I like to think that there is a mortgage out there for anybody. Yeah. And if someone has a good job or had a good job and had equity and had a 20% down payment or whatever the case may be, we can find them a mortgage. There are great mortgage brokers out there. There are law firms like us that have access to private funds, and there is a solution for everybody so that the deal can still close.
I absolutely agree. Another question that I have is somebody who purchased a home prior to COVID, very often a realtor is going to put a clause there to have the buyer revisit the property before closing. Usually it's 2 to 3 times depending on the length of the closing. What now? Okay, those deals have been done before, signed before, agreed upon before, and now we're in a COVID situation where people don't feel comfortable letting anybody coming to their house. What do you say about this?
Well, first of all, for the person that doesn't want to have somebody coming to their house, as a realtor, I would be trying to find another solution to allow the buyers to look at the house. So maybe say, look, yeah, let's do a virtual tour. Like, I don't want my client to come into your house any more than you want my client to come into the house. How about, getting us on, let's do a tour on FaceTime or Skype or whatever you want to do. You'll walk around the house and I'll pass on questions that my client may have or that they might want to look at a little bit more closely. That's a great solution for both sides. And at the end of the day, if a seller doesn't want you coming into the house, even though the agreement says they're allowed 3 more visits or something like that, it's not a reason why you can terminate the agreement of purchase and sale. But if when the deal closes, the buyer finds a whole bunch of things that were wrong with the house that could have been dealt with beforehand, then it might open up a bit of a can of worms after closing. But the deal will still close.
Right, absolutely. All right, so now what about if a landlord has a house that they want to put on the market? They were going to put on the market before COVID and they decided, okay, I'm going to wait a little bit, because at first it was for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, right? And now it's keep on going. So what if they want to put that home on the market and it's tenanted, the tenant doesn't want any showings? What are we doing about this?
Again, you have to talk to the tenant and find out what their fear is. And if the tenant is, fearful of COVID-19 and doesn't want to have showings because doesn't want numerous people into the house, the idea is find a different solution. So ask the tenant, would it be okay if we do 1 showing? And that 1 showing is going to be a photographer who's going to do a complete virtual tour, not just a regular tour like you would see that you've seen on realtors' websites. It's just, you know,
Right,
it's got lots of fluff in it, but I'm talking about a thorough,
a metaphor,
you know,
where we're going
yeah,
right in.
exactly. A long video of every aspect of every little nook and cranny of that house or condo. And, you know, and during that time, we will, you know, you find another place to go to. You know, we don't want you in the premises, so you can distance yourself. We will assure you that the person that comes in will have proper protocol, gloves, masks, sanitization. They won't touch anything, and they will be in and out over a certain time frame. And this is the way we can do it, and do it safely for everybody involved. And it's much nicer for a tenant to hear that than hear, oh, we're just going to give you 24 hours notice and we want to keep bringing people in to see the house. I wouldn't blame a tenant for not wanting that to happen.
Of course, of course. But legally, do they have a ground for saying absolutely no showings?
Legally they must allow showings with 24 hours notice. However, during COVID-19, nobody's going to enforce that. So even if they say no, there's no place you can go to get an order. You can't go to the landlord and tenant tribunal. And even if the tribunal was open, the tribunal would say, no, this is putting a person at a health risk. So even though the law is, yeah, you have to allow showings, if they have a health reason for not allowing it, then you're stuck with that. So I wouldn't try to push that on a legal standpoint.
All right, so now since April 1st, it is possible, if you have problems paying your rent, that you could somehow delay it. What are the landlord recourse if the tenants are stop paying rent because they maybe have to pay a mortgage, they have financial obligation? Can they do anything about that?
The short answer is no. You can't do anything about it because the landlord and tenant tribunal is closed, and there's no place for landlords to go to enforce their rights. The better answer is for every single landlord and tenant to communicate with each other to discuss what the problems are. And quite often tenants don't realize that there are lots of places available to them through the government where they can get, you know, their $2,000 a month and some other supplements. And, you know, so there may be avenues to getting money into the hands of tenants that the tenants don't realize. And landlords have to be accommodating as well. I have one of the lawyers in my office lives in a building downtown, and it's a complete rental building. And the landlord on the 1st of the month of April gave every person in that building a $100 gift card to Metro to go buy groceries.
Wow.
Now that is an amazing landlord.
That is impressive, yeah.
So, and I've got lots of landlord clients, and the ones that have said how, you know, that took the attitude of how dare the tenant, you know, not pay the rent or even suggest they're not going to pay the rent. I tell the landlord, like, you know, you got to be accommodating. The tenants are not doing this because they just want to be not nice.
Absolutely.
They're doing it because they're in a bad situation.
Absolutely.
And figure out a solution. And that might be let them have let them not take off a month. Let them pay half or a third or whatever the case may be. And then let them make it up over the next 18 months later or some other time frame when we're all back in business.
Yes.
It's been much tougher for the commercial tenants because they don't have the same rights as residential ones. But yeah, we have to all work together and create a solution. And the solution is not being a hard-nosed landlord and saying, you must pay the rent, because that will backfire. The tenant won't pay a penny, and then it'll be 6 months before the landlord gets in front of a landlord and tenant tribunal.
Absolutely. And on the other hand, being the tenant, try to do the best you can that you can pay your rent.
Absolutely. And a tenant also, if a tenant comes to a reasonable solution with their landlord, they're going to have peace of mind, and they're going to also maintain their credit rating. The worst thing a credit tenant can do is not pay any rent, not do any deal with the landlord. Eventually, the landlord will get to the landlord and tenant tribunal, and in the interim, the tenant has lost their credit, and if the landlord is able to kick them out, the tenant's not going to be able to get another place. Their credit's going to be ruined. They're not going to have a reference. It's going to be horrible for the tenant.
That is such a good point. That's such a good point. Well, Mitch, I work with you in your office. Thank you very much. Can you tell us where we can find you?
The easiest place to find us is at www.kormancompany.com, and it's Korman company.info.com. But we have lawyers in Toronto, in York Region, in Barrie, in Ottawa, in Durham. We have lots of lawyers. We have 9 lawyers spread out all over the place, and we're closing deals because we're virtual now, and we're able to close everything without actually face-to-face interaction with our clients. We do it through Skype and Zoom and everything. We can close deals all over the province of Ontario. I'm not suggesting everybody use us all over Ontario, but use us where you can, and we're always happy to help and get deals closed.
Well, I know that I've definitely used some of your lawyers before, and I had great experience. So recommending you to everybody I know. Thank you very much for joining me today. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Gemma, thank you so much. It was great talking to you too.